Welcome to today's MasterMine End User webinar on dashboards for GoldMine, using your MasterMine, of course. Today, our presenter will be Rob Maclack, which you all know. We have a large group today, so we're kind of hoping for a lot of questions. This is going to be kind of a big one, a lot of technical stuff going on, but hopefully you guys can keep up and ask questions along the way. So without further ado, Rob, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Carnegie. As Carnegie mentioned, this will be a fairly technical webinar for us today, which is somewhat unusual. We try to give information that's interesting and useful for people all the way across the spectrum of MasterMine users, from the relatively technical all the way to the not at all technical, who just want to be able to do some kind of basic stuff. Our topic today, though, is one that really requires a good deal of involvement, but it is meant to be a way of doing dashboards for GoldMine that is considerably less, or let's say requires considerably less knowledge on the part of the user than, say, someone who wanted to make changes to the built-in GoldMine dashboards. So without further ado, I think I'll dive right in here and we'll take a look. I'm going to show you one slide, and then we're going to go into our into the actual working with the software. So these are the skills and techniques that I'm going to go into today. Excuse me, and I should probably also apologize in advance for my advancing cold here, but I think we'll get through this. These are the topics that that I've sort of laid out as being skills and techniques that you want to have, so that that will essentially allow you to take MasterMine as is and build dashboards. You probably will have little questions about individual skills that are listed here. That's fine. As we go along, go ahead and post your clarifying questions in the GoToMeeting dialog, or the GoToWebinar dialog, and Carnegie will try to field those as we go along here. And if there are larger ones, or they're ones that really require some more specific attention than would be appropriate for the whole general audience, then we'll either take them at the very end, or we will take them offline. So I'm not even going to go through these right now verbally. I'll come back to this this slide here after talking about the actual techniques, and we'll come back here and deal with it then. So, and please pardon me for the throat clearing. I'm going to try to switch off my mic whenever I need to do that, but do what we can. Okay, so with that, let's switch over and actually look at a dashboard that now this is a dashboard that I created beforehand in order to give you just sort of a sense of where we're going with this, and I want to talk a little bit about what this does and how it was set up. Now, I chose to create a dashboard that is kind of the way that I typically recommend, which is a MasterMine workbook. This is still a MasterMine workbook. It's just been arranged and set up so that a typical sales manager would be able to pop this open, have their graphical views of things all on one page, and yet have some detail to go back to. So I've set this up here so that our filter fields go across rather than in a stack up and down. That is a setting among many others that I will talk about along the way here. The user can go in here and, for example, choose, we're right now looking at third quarter of 2015 of August, and if we were to change this, let's say, to September, we can choose September. Now, there is actually an extra step that needs to happen here for the reports to update. Namely, you change it to September and then double-click on September, and that sets all of the support tables in the workbook to be the same month. That, by the way, is a feature of MasterMine that's available for all kinds of reports. We're just sort of applying it here in the dashboard mode. It is, by the way, the same feature that's on one of the toolbars. A couple of other things to know about this dashboard is I'll go into what it actually means here. Actually, why don't I just cover that first? So the first panel here shows us calls and appointments completed by sales rep within whatever time period we've chosen. In this case, I took all of September. In your case, you might choose just for a particular week or a particular month or a particular day for that matter. We just have a relatively small set of data, so I wanted to be able to impress you with pictures.
I got a question for you, Rob.
Go ahead, Carnegie.
Do these graphical pages link directly to a drill down?
Well, in fact, they do, and I'll come to that in just a moment. So let me just explain what's on this page right now, and then we'll go back to it. So this is calls and appointments completed by sales rep in the time period. These are the call results. So in other words, going by the result codes of the actual calls and grouping those into whether a person was contacted or not contacted or something else. Usually other means they just didn't fill in the field. Or it's some invalid field there, or something not expected. So that will show up here as well. Appointments scheduled. So we're assuming that we've got a sales team that we are monitoring here that have certain expectations of how many calls and appointments they will actually do in a day, but also a number of calls and appointments scheduled for the future. So obviously you don't, well, in many cases you don't do the appointments the same day that you schedule them. Then there's a forecast down here. This is our products broken into 3 groups and showing the colors of shown by the color of the individual sales rep that sold them. And then over here is our actual sales over time, month by month since the beginning of 2014 up through the end of October, which is when our data ends. With individual lines representing individual sales reps. Now that's the face of it. That's this on the face of it, and our way of setting, as I mentioned, putting the settings up here. Now, of course, any field that you have in GoldMine can be a setting up here, and it's very easy to have them in here. So I'll talk about that here in just a second. All of these what am I calling them? Graphs. All of these graphs, except for one, actually hyperlinks back to another tab inside the same workbook that has the background data for that tab. So for example, on the calls and appointments counts, if I just click on it, it actually goes to that other tab that has the pivot tables and actually copies of the charts that associate with it. So, and the user, of course, can look at the specific numbers here. Now, it's also possible to just set up the chart right from the start as being one that has, to change the chart type here. Excuse me, not the chart type, but actually the design of the chart type. You can actually have it show the detail that's underneath it as part of the chart on the front here as well. I just didn't do that. There's quite a few selections here for how you relate both the chart and its source data on the screen here. But as I guess kind of the main thing that I wanted to point out there was, in this case, being able to click on those to go down to the underlying data means that you really have the usual tricks that you would have as far as including data in the workbook, in the pivot table that you have for regular MasterMine things. So if you want to include other fields, you do that the normal ways. Regarding just the last thing I think I wanted to point out just on what the end user of the dashboard would have in terms of flexibility, you can also do things like this. This is kind of a nice feature here. So if I go down here, I left the forecast chart here without a hyperlink just so I can demonstrate later on how to add that hyperlink in. But I also made it so that it has some selections within it. So our forecast we may want it to cover a different time period than specifically what's up there. So we can have separate controls for different parts of the dashboard. So these three up here actually apply to the top row of charts. It just happens to be that way. We could have had other ones down here that also are monthly charts. This is a forecast of everything that's forecast down here. So I left the controls for it right here in the chart, so we can go in here and choose, we don't want to include, let's say, 2015. We only want the 2016 forecast, and so on. So the user does have that, or you can leave the user with that kind of control over what they see. Likewise, not just for settings in the time period, they might do things like say, well, you know what, I'm not really interested in the systems, I just want to see the gadgets and widgets in this one, so let them control that as well. This is, I hope that what you're seeing here is a good contrast with the kind of situation with the dashboards that are built into GoldMine, where you don't really, as an end user, have this kind of control over what you see and what's included. You have some control. I don't want to overstate that, but in terms of this being a user-friendly kind of experience, I think that you would agree this is going to wind up being much easier. Okay, and the other sort of key thing I wanted to show on this was you can also do things like change the orientation of the objects within the pivot table. So for example, this is gadgets and widgets by sales rep. So each of the different types of products, but broken out by sales reps. You have the pivot chart tools that are built into Excel, which really are quite extensive. You can change formatting, you can do lots of different things here. This is one button I like here a lot, switch row and columns. And what will happen when I click that button is you see this switch right away to where now we're broken out by individual sales reps and the products that they have forecast. And I've just in advance laid this out so that our forecast shows the person with the most on the left and down to the least on the right. Okay, so that is the end point. Now what I want to talk about is the skills and techniques for actually getting to this. Carnegie, have I left out anything that's crucial here?
I think we're good right now.
Okay, great. Carnegie and I worked on this a little bit together, so I'm going to refer over to Carnegie once in a while. Okay. So let's go to how do you actually get started with building a MasterMine dashboard. And really the way you get started is the same way you get started with all MasterMine reports. You create a report. And you would create one report that, well, in this case, there are several different types of information we're looking at, right? We're looking at completed calls and appointments. We're looking at forecast sales. We're looking at completed sales. The data that we're pulling together here is from several different places in GoldMine that are not really, it's not the same data. They're related in certain ways, but they are not the same sets of data. We need several different queries of data to feed this dashboard. So we want to start with one. Our top left one in the report we were already looking at was calls and appointments, so I would typically start then by just creating a calls and appointments MasterMine report. Pretty easy to do. I'll just go ahead and hit create. And by the way, I'm not going to go through this in full detail. We've only got an hour, well, actually only 45 minutes left here. So pardon me if we don't wind up 45 minutes from now with the exact same report already done, or dashboard, but that's why I wanted to show you that up front. Okay, so I'm going to create a report that includes calls and appointments. Now, the data that you include in here does not need to be restricted only to what you think is going to be graphically represented. It can be of greater detail, and of course that's valuable, especially if you're going to leave your user with the ability to drill through the graph back to the actual data. How the two of them are going to relate, well, here I'll get to that here in a moment. So to start with, I'm going to go ahead and do a history of calls and appointments. One of the really key ways that this is a big advantage over working with the GoldMine dashboards, of course, is, the query is taken care of here. The fields that you're going to include all taken care of, and you can even do things like include, other criteria such as result codes and your own user-defined fields and however you want to do that, just by checking them on. There's no more complication to it than that. So I'll go ahead and generate this. Now, what I'm going to do here is, because I know this is going to be a dashboard that I'm building, I will name this starting workbook as my beginning dashboard, as the dashboard that I'm going to build. Let's call this dashboard for sales. So I'm creating an Excel workbook. It's going to have that name. I would normally put a history date on there, but again, I've got sort of limited demo data here to work with. And voila, at the beginning here is our starting simple report that shows our users for the current year and the appointments and calls that they've completed. Now, this by itself is not a particularly useful number. How many appointments or calls did they do? Well, I should say it's not a useful number if you don't have them collecting, or if you do have them collecting any further level of detail. If you only have them record an appointment or a call if they had a significant conversation, in other words, if that's one of your business rules of GoldMine, then yeah, this is maybe a little bit closer to what you want, but it's not very, I mean, you're denying yourself some detail if you don't just simply have a business rule that says every time you call somebody, whether it was a significant conversation or not, record that you called them in GoldMine, indicate by the result code whether you left a message or you actually talked with them, or you talked, or use the activity codes to indicate which product you talked about, A, B, or C, or you have to set your own ground rules for how you store information in GoldMine, what makes the most sense in the context of your sale, your way of selling. This is something that I don't want to go too far down the line with, but it's that specificity about your business, that uniqueness about your business that needs to be captured in the dashboard. And that's why it's not possible for GoldMine or any other CRM company to provide you with dashboards up front that you just open up and they work. You need to be able to translate the realities of your unique business into the dashboard. Okay. So with that said, I'm not going to dig into this much deeper here. Of course, in many other webinars we've talked about doing finer adjustments to the actual pivot table itself. What I'm going to do is go straight to making a graph out of this. I'm going to put this graph right on the same page here that we're already on. And in this case, I'm going to choose a bar chart. And just a quick word about which chart you choose. Bar charts are usually good for doing comparisons. One sales rep next to another, and so on. A pie chart typically is used if you're looking at one element and you want to know how does it break up among 3 or 4 different possibilities. A pie chart might show you our sales this month broken out by product. And you would do that with a very simple one-dimensional pivot table as your data source. In this case, we've got a real 2-dimensional table. In fact, we'll see here in a minute. We'll actually change the dimensions a little bit, but really, typically, 2-dimensional data sources deserve a bar chart or a line chart. And in the case of line charts, for the most part, we use those to show trends over time. One of your dimensions might be the months of the year, showing the lines of your sales, as we did in the front. So which one you choose here really depends on some forethought about how you want the information to be presented, but it also, it doesn't make any sense on a 2-dimensional chart to try to do a pie chart. It's not going to work, or a 2-dimensional table. Okay, so I'll choose this bar chart here and just take a look at what this creates for me. And one of the things that I like a lot about working in Excel, and I'm going to say MasterMine generally, is that you can sort of feel your way forward as far as finding what you want to do. If you were doing this in the GoldMine dashboard designer, you kind of have to go back and forth between a design screen and the actual product. And all that back and forth is incredibly time-consuming and very confusing. So you don't really know what's the effect when you change things around, for example. So in this case, just taking what I've got here, we've got a by user, the activity type, appointments, and calls, and you can see them both showing up here. We've got our time constraints on the top. So that actually is a table that's pretty close to the one that I had in the dashboard that I created at the beginning. So what I will do actually is go ahead and take this one and use this chart on my dashboard. So where's my dashboard? What I'm going to do is rename this tab source for calls and appointments. So I literally will call this call and appointment source. And I want to call it that with a name that's going to be meaningful for me among a whole set of tabs, one of which will be dashboard. The first one will be dashboard, and all the other ones will be sources in this case, but they don't, you wouldn't always necessarily do that. Now I'm going to create a new worksheet in here. I'm going to call this new worksheet dashboard. Spell it right. And I'm going to have this dashboard be the first tab, so I'm going to left click on it and just drag it over and make it be the first tab in my workbook. Now I've got it sort of a blank slate here, and what I want to do is copy, in this case, I want to copy just the graph onto the dashboard page. So I'll copy this, I right-clicked on it to select it, copied it, went to the dashboard, I'm going to go down a few rows to allow room for my controls, and paste it in. So there's our first graph in here. Now, this graph exists on both pages, here and on the main dashboard page. The advantage of that, the reason that I'd like to be able to do that is so that when you are drilling down, when you do go down to this level of detail, you can still have a connection between what you see in the table and what you see in the graph, so that any adjustments you do over here will have known results up in the front end. Now on the dashboard, you probably noticed before that we made these other buttons go away, the on year, the CH records, which is telling us what's being counted in here. The dashboard user probably doesn't care about that stuff too much, as long as they know that the settings are right, up above. So I'm going to right-click on those items, and I'm given a choice down here to simply hide this is to hide the filter buttons. That one is a filter button, these other ones are not. This is just to hide all the field buttons on the chart. So right-clicking there and making the choice simply removes those buttons from the table. Last thing that I think I need to do here is actually put some sort of a label on this table that's going to make sense for what we're doing. Now, of course, this is Excel, and with charts, and many people on the call probably have even more experience than I do with Excel charting. You still have all of the functionality for charting that you're used to, so indulge yourself, do all the things that you might want to do. The item that I want to add in here is going to be a chart title. So I've gone to the layout tab of the pivot chart tools, and these tools show up whenever you have a pivot chart selected. I'm going to put a chart title above the chart, and we'll call this one calls and appointments. Okay, now so I've here, and now if you've thought about this a little bit, thought ahead, you probably realize, oh, there's a little bit of a thing here that I'm not going to know about yet, which is, well, how do I get a second chart in here of data that comes from a whole different MasterMine report? You probably know that if you go to another MasterMine report, well, I already have that dashboard open here, but I'm going to go ahead and create another report here because let's say we need to include our forecasted sales as well. So I'm going to go back to my Create dialog, and I'm actually going to create a sales forecast report. I still had the Create dialog open, so it's pretty easy and fast to do that. Now, in this case, I don't need to name this the dashboard because we're not going to actually go into the existing dashboard workbook. We're just going to create a workbook from which we will copy our sales forecast info. So I'm going to call this sales forecast for dashboard or something like that.
I'm going to chime in a minute too, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to start from scratch. If you guys have reports that you're working on now or that you have functioning for you, you could do this as well. You just don't have to start from
Right.
scratch.
Right. Great point. Great point. In this case, I'm building it from scratch just because well, on the one hand, I will be very clear what it is that's in there because I didn't work with it earlier. But right, Carnegie's right. If you've got other workbooks that you've already been working with and you've done some refinement on them, by all means, use those. And here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and save this new workbook that I created, even though I haven't done anything with it yet, and I'm going to close it. And the reason I need to do that, why don't I just demonstrate this? If I try to copy this pivot table into the dashboard workbook, the result of it, here I'll just make an empty space here. The result of it is still a table, but it's not a pivot table, and it's not refreshable. It's just a snapshot of the workbook that I had there. That's not going to do it for me. What I need to have is I need to have that report, this one here, and let me go ahead and close it, opened in the same Excel instance that I was in before. And MasterMine has a tool for doing that. Go to the top of back to the dashboard workbook. So I'm back in the dashboard workbook now. I'm going to the MasterMine toolbar. And I'm clicking Open Report, which is this button near the right-hand side of the MasterMine toolbar there. Now that will allow me to go and now hopefully I'm going to easily find the location where I put that. Sort of forgot, I neglected to remember where I keep things on this demo system here. Let's see.
Yeah, no help to you here either.
Yeah, actually the best thing to do is I still got my create dialog open here, so I can just
smart man.
So I'll just copy that from there, and I'll go in here, open that location, and find the report that I created, which was called, I believe, forecast, wasn't it? Forecast, was it sales forecast?
Sales.
Yeah.
Look at the create dialog.
Can certainly do that. Sales forecast for dashboard. Now, with a little more thinking, I could have sorted this by the date, and I would have gotten today's one there. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open that. So what I've done is I have actually opened that sales forecast workbook in the same instance of Excel that my dashboard is in. The value of that being, I can now go down here and say, let's call this sales forecast source. I'm renaming the tab in the same workbook that I'm in, but now I can right-click on that tab, move it or copy it, either way, into the dashboard workbook. This is just regular Excel functionality here. Copy it into the dashboard workbook, where I'll put it at the end. Say OK. And now I have my dashboard, I've got my additional data source over here, and I can begin to refine this down to what I want to show on my dashboard. Again, without going into too much detail on this one, I'll just kind of set these up quickly. Let's do our year or our month, take out the fields that we're not as interested in, and actually bring this down to where, now for our forecast here, we can show potential amount, which is the full dollar amount of the sales, or we could show probable amount, which for dashboard purposes is actually kind of a nice number. That is each sales dollar amount multiplied by its probability. So if it's only a 10% probability, only 10% of the dollars are counted. In this case, I'm going to go ahead with the potential amount, and we'll leave the other ones. Off. So I'm just going to remove each of those. So I'm right-clicking on those and removing them from the data area of our report. Now, just removing them from the data area of the report does not remove them from the report itself, of course. So if we wanted to do something like, say, let's leave the probability in here as a filter, and have it not include ones where the probability is less than 25%, for example. Just leave the higher ones. You know, you can do that, and this would be sort of a behind the scenes meaning that that 25% threshold is not going to show up on the dashboard unless you put in a text explanation of what's happening. But this way you can control what it is that you're showing here. And the rest is really just a matter of breaking it out by who's the user doing in the forecast. And then, you know, we also want to include our year, month, week, whatever constraints on this, and that will give us the information that we need. So now we have our simple sales report here. Now we can make our graph just the usual way. Go to Options on the Pivot Table Tools menu, choose Pivot Chart. A new chart is created. I'll use the same style in this case. And we'll put that right up here. And so now that's you know, individual users going across. One of the ways that I like to break it out is by product. So let's say since they're solid, you know, each one of them is a solid line, we're not getting any additional information visually on our dashboard, but we could add it without really taking up any more real estate on our dashboard, just by breaking out each of these bars, which will remain the same size, by product. So I'm going to pull in our product information here, and you can see each time I make a change, it changes the graph there a little bit. Now I've got gadgets, widgets, and in this case what I'm calling other, or actually I call that system in the other one. So I'm going to group these. This is again just using my MasterMine tools. So we'll group them there and call those system in our product group. I'm going to take my gadgets. They're all next to each other because they're just alphabetically that way, but of course I could just pick them out of a list or use our search field content button to pull together all the ones that contain the word gadget, so on. Why don't I just do that one because it's a little bit, might help you to know this. So if it contains the word gadget, pull it together into a group that defaults to gadget, we'll say OK. And likewise with our widgets. And OK. All right, so now we've created this new field over here that's called product2, that's derivative of the product. Now I'm going to rename it, so I just click on it and I'm going to type a new name, product group. And so that really will be our way of breaking up our products into something that graphically works in our chart, but that doesn't complicate it visually. Now, right now it's a little bit complicated visually because we chose a chart that does that actually breaks them up horizontally. We've got widgets, gadgets, and system, but then each person has their own bar instead of stacking them up. Well, that's just a chart style issue. So if I right-click on the chart and change the chart type and go instead to 3D chart, now I've got something a little closer to what I wanted. Although now we're showing widgets, gadgets, and system broken out by user instead of users broken out by product. So what that tells me is we've got a reversal of polarity here. We want to have the user IDs in the x-axis, and we want the products in the legend here. And we can accomplish that actually by dragging them, or by using that function that I pointed to before under design that allows you to switch them at will back and forth. So that does it here locally while you're building the dashboard, but it's also available to the actual user of the dashboard. So having gotten that down to another report that we want to, or another chart rather, that we want to use in our dashboard, I'll right-click on that again, copy it, go over to our main dashboard screen, paste it in, and then place it on the screen where I want to have it. So as I mentioned before, I'm not going to go through and design, sort of run through part by part all of the things that I did to create that other workbook because we just have limited time for doing that. But there are a couple of the other, or actually quite a number of the other skills here that I want to cover. Let's
Before
pause for
you
a moment.
do,
Yeah.
we do have somebody requesting to see the steps to embed the pivot table again. If you could open up another report and show how to bring it in.
To get the pivot table into the workbook?
Yes.
Okay.
Do
It's
you have time for
actually,
that?
well, here, let's just do that quickly. So it's create the workbook. We don't need to do that again, I don't think. Everybody creates MasterMine workbooks. Create it, save it to some location where you, and remember where you put it. Then all you need to do is go up to the MasterMine toolbar, choose Open Report. That's this button, not the File Open. That's very different. You need this one, which is a MasterMine Open. And then find the workbook that you created before, whatever it is, and hit Open, and that will bring the workbook into the same dashboard. The other steps were having it in the same instance of Excel. So here's the one that I opened before that's in the same instance. So the next thing I did was I renamed the tab so that I could distinguish it from the other tabs that I'm in the workbook that I'm moving this tab into, and then I right-clicked on it, chose Move or Copy, create a copy, go up here to the book that you're copying into, which is the dashboard, and then hit OK. You should be able to find your own way through all of that. That's mostly Excel functionality, but if you have questions, of course, come back to us. Okay, so let me just check my list of things that I wanted to cover here. Okay, so one of the next big things to do is to add the control at the top. So back on our dashboard here. Right now, we've got really just, well, these two would have different controls, but what we want to do is have some fields up here that we can select from that will limit what we show on the dashboard itself. And that can be accomplished really with any pivot table that contains fields that are the fields that you want to use for limiting. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just take a copy of this pivot table. I'm really only taking it for the purposes of using the top part, the filter part. But I need the entire pivot table because you can only move whole pivot tables at a time inside of Excel. So I'm going to copy that pivot table, go back to my dashboard screen. I'm going to paste it up here in the top. You can see the pivot table is underneath the chart. Charts can float above pivot tables, which I don't know if you're aware of this, but pivot tables also float above the Excel screen or the worksheet as well, for the most part. And as I mentioned, all I'm really interested in here is the filtering end of this. So I want to make sure that I've got my year, my quarter, and my month, or my year and month if that's the only things that are going to be used in the filter area of my pivot table here. The other stuff that's down below, I would really kind of prefer that it just be hidden behind my top chart, which is what I'm going to let it do. I'm going to add the on month field here to my filter. Actually, let's put in on, well, here. What I was going to do was move it down. Let's do this. I'm going to insert 4 cells here that include both the cells on and off the pivot table. In other words, on the filter area here, but on the worksheet itself. And if I right-click there and hit Insert, it's going to ask me, do I want to shift the other cells down? I do. And the effect of that is it pushed the rest of this pivot table down below this chart, pretty close to below the chart. I can adjust this up a little bit. There we go. And then, so now I've got controls here that I can select from. Now this is not tied to this pivot table. So if I go down here and choose, August of 2015, the pivot table itself, or the chart rather, doesn't update all by itself. But as I mentioned before, all MasterMine pivot tables within a workbook are tied together in the following way. Any filter field that you have in any pivot table, when you double-click on the value that you've set it for, will attempt to go out to any other pivot tables in the same workbook and find filter items that have the same name and change the setting to be the same. So in this case, I've changed, on month to August. If we were to actually go over to this other tab, you see that, well, there is no on month field in here yet, so I will need to add it. So this one's set to all. The one on our main dashboard is set to August. And having set this to August, now if I double click on it, you see what it did was it went through the entire workbook, looked for any other occurrence of on month in the filter area of pivot fields, and it set it to be the same. The result of that is you essentially are able to make a setting here that applies to the data sources that feed these pivot tables on the front, or that feed these pivot charts on the front of the screen. And then the other thing that I did here was a setting in order to have them, instead of having them stacked and in order to have them in a row here, that's a setting of this pivot table. So if I right-click on it and go to the pivot table options, one of my choices here is to display the fields in the filter area. This is just on the first tab, on the Layout and Format tab. Have them go over and then down. And if I leave this at 0, 0 fields per row, then it will just continue on indefinitely. Just add it whenever I add a new one, it will always be farther to the right. But if I wanted to only do the first 3 in a column above there, the first 3 in a row, and then start a second row of fields, then I could limit it here. So that puts them together in a line, year and month going across, and now we're getting a little bit closer to the actual, to the finished report that I had before. Let's see, the hyperlink. So how do we set it up so that we go from, so that when we double click on this chart, instead of going into the chart reformatting dialogues, we instead have it hyperlink over to the page that has the calls and appointments on it. Well, what we need to do is select the chart in question. So in this case, we want this chart to go to the calls and appointments. We want this chart down here to go to the formatting page. So I'll choose this one, go to Insert. This is the regular Excel insert, the regular sort of main Excel insert, not on the pivot chart tools or anything. So it's Insert, and then the button is Hyperlink. And if I go to Place in this document, you'll see what I've got here is other locations within the same workbook that I can choose where to go to. You can also define names of cell locations and so on. You can be more specific about it within the other workbooks. But just in terms of getting to the to those other tabs, if I want this to go to Call and Appointment Source, when I click on it, that's all I need to do. And now you see when I'm hovering over this, you can see that it tells you actually where it would go if I click there. Well, let me click off of it just to, now you can see that I've got the little hand icon that indicates when I click, it's going to go over to the Call and Appointment Source tab. And likewise, we could go down here and do the same thing. Now, what if this is a question that just came up earlier today. What if I want to take that link off of there? Selecting that dashboard is a little bit difficult because now whenever you click on it, it jumps to another location. So how do I select that chart? Well, if you right-click on that chart and then hit Escape, now you've got it selected. That's just a little trick there. And now I can go over and hit Hyperlink and actually remove the link from there if I wanted to, or do any other changes to that chart that I want to do, that are available from either the buttons above or the short menus. Okay, so that's hyperlinking. Refreshing. Your MasterMine toolbar has a very nice Refresh All button here that even though you've got a workbook here with several different data sources, with a number of different charts that it drives, your Refresh All button up here will simply refresh the entire everything that's refreshable, it will refresh it. Now, it is possible to do individual settings on things, and you'll want to be aware of this. It is possible to for example, go to the security on just one of these tables and disable the data refresh. And if you do that, then obviously refresh all is not going to work for that table. It's just going to stay the same, regardless of what happens. So, be clear about what happens when you go and hit refresh all. So in this case, it's actually telling us that the data refresh is turned off for one of these. It's kind of a rare instance where it actually makes sense to turn off the data refresh for one of these. So, if that's the case for you, go to security, re-enable the data refresh, and it'll make more sense. Now, it is also possible, in earlier versions of Excel, they actually had a much better way than they have now of setting periodic refresh. As far as I know, I went looking for this earlier today, there's not a way to set your refresh to happen, you'd say, every 5 minutes from the buttons that are in Excel. I could be wrong about this. Now, I'm in Excel 2010. 2013 could be a little different. Excel 365 could be a little different. But I have not recently found the thing that allows you to refresh it every 5 minutes. That said, it is in there, and we can programmatically set up your dashboard to do that, to just sit on a system, sit on your screen. Some customers want to actually put up a dashboard and put it on a monitor out in front of their whole sales floor, so the sales floor can actually see the dashboard refreshing, and you can actually have it just up there all day on the monitor, refreshing every 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever you want to do. And the refresh really doesn't, depending on the quantity of data that you're working with, the refresh might not take any significant resources to do. In our case, even though we might have 5 or more different caches of data here, the actual refresh happens almost immediately and doesn't take much in the way of resources. So it can be set up to do that, is my point. In a later version of MasterMine, we'll probably add a button in here that will allow you to just to do that. Let's see. So final kind of cleanup stuff. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We did have a question. Somebody was keen and saw that on one of your slides at the beginning, you showed 2 reports or 2 pivot tables on one page. How did you achieve that?
2 pivot tables on one page. Basically, oops, let me go. Sorry, I meant to go back just to this other tab here. So I did it the same way that I copied this pivot table to the dashboard page. You highlight the pivot table, and you need to cover the pivot table at least, all of the pivot table. Right-click, hit copy, and then you can really go anywhere else. Again, it has to be within the same instance of Excel here. It has to be, sort of typically in the same workbook, and paste it. And there you go. Now I have 2 different pivot tables. So this one could, theoretically show a different set of data than the other one does. And now I've got 2 in there. Now they're on the same worksheet, and the plus, by the way, of having 2 pivot tables on the same workbook, on the same worksheet, is that obviously, they're both within view of each other, and you can really mix and match pivot tables very nicely this way. But what I warn you about is you need to be aware of column widths and the fact that a column, these 2 pivot tables both share the B and C and D columns, and as long as they're showing information that is relatively the same width, everything works fine. But if I go in here and say, I'm interested in showing, references will probably be a much longer thing. So in order to display this information, we suddenly have much wider columns. That forces this one to be probably wider than it needs to be. And so all I'm saying is you need to be cognizant of the fact that your spreadsheet still is one set of rows that have, for the entire row, a single width or a single height, and one set of columns that likewise are uniform.
So just to clarify,
yes?
you can, and this one you copied and pasted the exact same one in the exact same worksheet, but you could copy and paste, say, this top pivot table to the sales forecast page or sheet and still be fine, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay, carry on.
Copy that, go over here, put it here. Okay. Yeah. So, and I presume that the attendee is really asking the question because you're interested in doing reports that will pull information from various different places, not necessarily for a dashboard, but for just a sort of like a hybrid, a report that shows multiple different kinds of information and makes them work together. We've got a lot of experience of working with that. That is sort of a unique little corner of working with MasterMine reports. So if you need some help with that, let us know. Okay. Some last items here just for kind of cleaning this up and getting down to that nice look that we had on the other one. One of the things we did was take away the grid lines on the page here. Removing grid lines is really a matter. There's various ways of doing it, but this is the one we chose to do it. Highlight the whole worksheet. If you click the top left button there, that highlights the whole worksheet, and then go to there's various ways to do this, but we go to Home and choose, was it all borders?
All borders, and pick your line color first.
Right. Yeah, so we make our line color white.
Then do all borders.
And then select it and do all borders. Okay.
There you go.
All right, so now we have, and again, I get the question fairly often with people saying, well, how do I make this be a nice looking report as opposed to look like a spreadsheet? I think oftentimes this is what the question was how do I get have the grid lines not show on the page? And as I say, this is one way to do that. When you're actually printing things out, you don't need to show the grid lines either. That's a different setting. Why don't I actually show that? So in the page setup, you can also do settings in here like turn off the grid lines or turn them on. That's just for when it gets printed, not for when you're looking at it on the screen. Okay, I think I covered almost everything here.
Let's look at your sheet.
Yeah, I know. On my sheet here, there is what I did the blanking of the grid. Hiding tabs. It is sometimes desirable to leave somebody with only a dashboard page and not the underlying things. By the way, if you do take those away, well, let's do this. I'll hide one of them. I'll hide just the forecast source here just to show how to do it. Right-click on the tab, hit hide, and voila, it's hidden. If you wanted to bring that back again, you could right-click on any tab down the tab row here and hit unhide and choose that one and unhide it. If it's hidden, however, or if it's hidden, the drill back to it obviously would not work. So if I were to, let's say, hide this tab and then go back to my dashboard and try to click to it, you can see obviously that doesn't work. Now, advantage to leaving it there, leaving it visible, is of course when they've got the detail back here, they can still drill through. The first drill through is sort of equivalent to the GoldMine or to the the GoldMine dashboard drill through, where you can see what's the source of the data. Well, actually, it's not quite. The next one would be equivalent to that, where we can double click on any one of these numbers here. That's just your regular MasterMine functionality, where you drill on and double click on a number and it shows you this. But this, of course, gets you back to the individual records as well. And this is it's going to be automatically part of any MasterMine report. So you don't need to do anything extra to make it so that drill through to the GoldMine records works for the dashboard user. It'll just automatically do that as long as you give them that access to those source data pages. And that's, by the way, that's another good reason to have a nice, neat set of source data pages. So don't expect your dashboard user only to use the dashboard if it's going to raise some questions for them. Well, what's the characters of these calls and appointments? Do I want to limit this to only ones that have certain activity codes or certain people or certain result codes, or that are for only for A-type customers are ones that are scored, as A customers versus the B and C customers or whatever. As long as you've got your demographic information in GoldMine, that can color what you see here, but it can also be something that the dashboard consumer can use for their own sorts of settings. I need to unhide that page so that I can still see it again. Okay, so, and that actually does cover all of the functionality I wanted to talk about here. So let's do a quick wrap up. So that's the list of all the things that I talked about. Actually got all of those in. I'm pretty surprised, a little surprised. Want to give you an opportunity here. If you are building dashboards yourself, if you want help building dashboards, if you are, well, either way, it is useful to have some backup from us. So I wanted to show you, give you just a quick summary of the support that's available from MasterMine. Of course, we can work with you. If you haven't worked with us before, if you just bought the software and ran with it, that's fine, and you probably have people on staff who can do all this stuff with the tips that I've given you. If you don't feel comfortable with that, this is a good way to get this stuff done quickly for you and not actually have to learn about all the ins and outs of the dashboard thing. So you can buy our credits. 10 credits is $450. That's 10 quarter-hour units. The dashboard that I showed you at the front of this, that we sort of built here, was something that took probably about 2 hours or so to build. If that gives you any kind of an idea of how much support you would need from us to accomplish something, usually you can get a pretty good in-depth dashboard built in a quite reasonable amount of time without having to go through that yourself. So these are the support packs that are available right now. We do actually have a holiday discount going on right now where you can buy until January 8th our support. And by the way, this support does not need to be used only for dashboards. You can use it for anything MasterMine-related. That's, getting your fields organized, getting your data cleaned up, because if you've got Updater, if you've got Updater, you know that you can actually drill through and change data in Excel and update that. I mean, essentially anything that really needs to be handled with your GoldMine data, you should be able to do using these tools. So as I was saying, 10% off until January 8th on the smaller support packs. On the larger support packs, 20% off. That's on new ones. If for those of you who are on this, if you're on this call, starting today, you can do this up through January 8th. So with that in mind, I think we've come to the end of our formal hour. And Carnegie, I think what we're going to do here is I'm going to move to the last slide here. Make sure that you've got our numbers where you can call us, the toll-free there, as well as the if you're calling internationally, use the second line. Carnegie, what I want to do here is if you've already got prepared some questions that you've had from people that are general ones, we'll handle those. Otherwise, we will end the recording and we'll just continue on with individual questions after that.
I don't have any questions in there right now. We kind of addressed them all as they came up.
Okay, wow.
But
well,
I'll go ahead and stop it, and we could sit on for a little bit if there's still a lot of people on. So